So this is my final video log for these, for module 4 of the project, and I just wanted to do a little bit of a reflection on how I feel everything's gone thus far. This fourth module has answered a lot of important questions regarding the project, and it's definitely changed my outlook on what I want from the project. So initially, as I've stated many times, it's always been a passion project. I love the genre of music that I'm studying, and I've been very open about the fact that I maybe went too ambitious with the exact style of the genre that I was going for. In terms of, I was going for a much more technical sort of iteration of progressive rock than was particularly necessary. But at the time that we started the project, that was the sort of progressive rock music that I was exposing myself to. And throughout module 1 and module 2, I really dived into that sort of form of the genre, and I looked a lot into processing time signature and being able to count, be able to spot by ear what these different time signatures were, how they were being played, how different instruments were linking up with each other, and that has been really useful practice, if for my general musicianship as well. I feel like I count things generally in a slightly different way to other people that I work with. I'm not saying that I'm like breaking new ground or anything, because I'm absolutely not. Other people would absolutely play some of the songs that I play, in my acoustic sets and with my band. They would definitely count some of the passages that we play in the same way I do. But to the other musicians that I work with, some of them don't count in the same way, and then I explain to them my way of sort of counting the parts, and it makes a lot more sense to them, and then all of a sudden they can play it. So it's not just in terms of the advanced time signatures, it's ways of working with syncopation, and being able to sort of find where you are within the bar, even though you're playing something that's heavily syncopated or that's a bit more advanced rhythmically than just straight up, hammering out chords or something like that. So that was really useful, and I don't regret doing it. I think it was necessary to expose myself to that very over-the-top form of the genre, to then realise that I needed to simplify, and this was something that came up during module 4 actually. I showed a supervisor something that was informed by some research that I'd done into classical form, and used a very technical progressive metal piece to sort of justify it and show an example of it. And my supervisor said straight away, that worries me a little bit, because that's not what you're talking about. You're trying to justify it when the actual music's not saying what you're saying. It's like you're clutching at straws. And he said to me, you go one route or another. You either go down this classical form route, and you really dive into making sure that your music follows this formula, or you go down the progressive structure route and you find a different way to incorporate your classical element. And he said to me, go back to the bare bones of it, the original bands that started the genre, and then modern bands that are doing what they're doing in a new way. So started looking back at bands like Pink Floyd, one of the godfathers of progressive rock, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the Moody Blues, even some Genesis, and then through my own sort of practice, you know, looking at bands like Queen, who weren't particularly progressive in the sense that most people think of it, but you know, a song like Bohemian Rhapsody is definitely progressive, and some of their earlier songs are also very, very progressive. You know, they experimented with technology. You know, Freddie Mercury and Brian May used delay to create all kinds of different effects that were like very out of this world and very strange, but ahead of their time, and they used them sort of in isolation in specific sections of a song, and that in itself is a form of progression. You know, it's a form of progressive music. It's experimenting with what you're capable of doing, and you know, seeing how it can inspire you. And I wish I could remember the name of the song, but there's a song, I think it's from Night of the Opera by Queen, the same album as Bohemian Rhapsody, and there's a section in it where Freddie Mercury sings for like 2 minutes using the same delay technique that Brian May used in his Brighton Rock solo that he does live every gig, where there's 3 different delays. One comes through the left, then one comes through the right, and then it comes through the centre. And they all overlap, and he creates harmonies and counter melodies with himself, and it's absolutely incredible. And that is, it's a very progressive technique. So I discovered that. I also looked at some progressive bands that I've followed for years that are not quite as technical, but still sort of a more modern formula than the bands like Pink Floyd, and that was a band called Coheed and Cambria. I bang on about them an awful lot because they've been a massive influence on me musically. You know, they use influences from all sorts of genres. You know, they've got a song that's very, very Led Zeppelin, Kashmir sort of atmosphere to it. They've got songs that definitely touch upon the Rush style of the more technical progressive rock music. You know, some of the odd time signature stuff and the very strange riffs and progressions. And then they've also got, you know, Pink Floyd style things that are very long and atmospheric. And then they've got their own sort of style that they carved out as well. And all of it's quite easy on the ear, which is something that, you know, the more technical stuff isn't. It's not very easy on the ear. It's sometimes a big challenge to listen to. So, you know, exposing myself to these types of bands that play a more simplified version of the genre, it made sense to me to follow what my supervisor was saying and look to simplify the sound rather than spending all this time trying to make everything as complex as possible, and thinking that was authentic, because it's not going to be as musically satisfying, and it's not going to be as enjoyable to listen to. And it was influenced by research, but it wasn't yielding results as such. So this was quite a fair way into the module 4, and you know, for this module I had every intention of producing an overture for as a prototype to sort of show the direction, but with the scope changing so much towards the back end of the module, that's unfortunately not come to fruition, because I sort of believed it was almost more important to make sure that I completely understood where I was going before trying to put any music together. So I had to dive right into classical form. I had to really immerse myself in it and sort of really carve out my understanding of these different forms of classical music and how I could apply them to the genre that I want to work in. And it's been a challenge. It really has. It's been hard work. But I do feel at this stage that I've got a very good understanding of how these styles, these classical forms work and how to function within them. And now it's a case of starting to write some themes, put some things together that I can mold into bigger pieces and begin to put these compositions together properly. I'm not at the stage that I wanted to be at, and I'm very open about that. But again, it's sort of a sacrifice that needed to be made to fully understand where I'm going. And although I did want to have music written at this stage, I actually went back to an old piece that I'd composed in Module 2, and I spoke about this in one of the other video logs, and I just ripped it apart. And just sort of, there are elements of it that I think could work still. The piece was the main section of it, which is a clean thing. I'll just grab a guitar so I can show you. It's played over these two chords. So it's a sort of that sort of a thing, and it's in 6/8 originally, and on the composition that I created for Module 2, I changed it so it was alternating time signatures, and it was going from 7/8 to 6/8 to 7/8, and then a bar of 3. So I'll give it a go here. So it was this sort of thing. So as you can see, I think it does work musically, but with that alternating of time signature, you never quite settle, and that's something that the progressive metal bands that do work in odd time signatures all the time, unless they deliberately want it to sound unnatural, it sounds natural, So, for example, there's a section in a Dream Theater song that alternates time signature. So I believe it is a bar of 6, then a bar of 9, then another bar of 6, and then a bar of 12. And obviously they're all even numbers, so it is going to sound a bit more regular. But, moving from 7 to 6 to 7 to 3, it's not a huge jump. 6 and 3, they both work into each other, and then the 7's just adding one more beat on a bar. So this section, it's got a lot of artificial harmonics in it, so it's going to be interesting to play it, but I'll give it a go for you. It's I'll try that again. So again, as you can see, it sounds a lot more natural that way. And that's because, you know, they're mastered composers who all went to Berkeley, and they know how to make all of that stuff happen, and they've studied that for years. And, you know, as much as I wish I could write something like that, and just sort of pull these songs out of thin air with parts that are like that, I can't. You know, it takes a lot more work for me to do something like that. And I think the original version of my Module 2 composition, before I started messing with it and turning it into different time signatures and everything like that, was actually more true to the style that I will be going down. But I think that's you know, discovering that's a good thing, because it means that I've gone over the top, I've experimented, I've gone all out, you know, tried the crazy, really advanced stuff, and then realised, you know, actually, simple is better. There are obviously moments where you can be allowed to go a little bit crazy and use that sort of stuff, and now that that's in my arsenal and I know I'm capable of doing that, it's something that I can use when it's necessary. And there will be moments, especially during, you know, for example, in the symphony, during the development phase of the sonata movement, where I can do that, or, you know, in the second movement, when it's, you know, it's a development phase, again, you can do that. You can go all out and make it a bit more quirky, but you've then got to ground it with the simple and the stuff that makes sense. And, you know, everyone always says less is more, and this is definitely an example of that. So, you know, I've gone around the houses and I've come back to a place where I know where I want to go. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't have a composition as a prototype going into the final project, but I've learned a lot in this module, and that's helped me to really set boundaries and be aware of myself, and not let creativity run away with me, and not let myself go over the top just because something sounds cool to me in the moment. You know, I'm actually trying to make sure that this all works in the body of the frameworks that I've set myself, you know, these classical frameworks. So for the last little bit of this video, I'll just literally run down what this final project is going to be. So there will be 3 compositions. There will be an overture, there will be a symphony, and there will be a sonata. They will all be in a progressive rock style. For submission, there will be an audio recording of these, which is not particularly, I'm not looking for sort of production value on this. I'm not looking to be judged on the production quality of it. It's the music, it's the musical content that I'm concerned with. So, you know, there'll be elements of, you know, maybe Logic drummer helping me to establish a drum part, you know, because I'm going to be doing this all by myself. I'm not a drummer, and having a helping hand in being able to program a drumming part is much simpler and much more efficient in terms of time than trying to figure out a drum part for everything and then get someone in to play it and then have them say it's not practical because I'm still learning how to write drum score. And, you know, it's all well and good being able to hear a sound in your head on an instrument that you don't play, but you've got to consider, can someone else play this? So, you know, there will obviously be communication with other musicians to make sure that this all works and it's all practical and playable. But things like Logic Drummer are really good tools to help sort of, it's not take a shortcut, but I guess it's sort of, it's more efficient, and it's a nice way of incorporating some sort of technical elements into the work. But yeah, I'm not intending to be judged on the production value and the quality of the recording. It's the musical content, the musical quality that I'm focusing on with this. There will then be the second part of the submission, which will be a score of each piece. Again, there's the ability to use you know, I've been informed about a guitar pickup that can sort of export MIDI, and so you play it in through this pickup, and connect it up to your DAW, and it will map it all out on MIDI that can then be exported into a Sibelius file. Again, it's going to make everything so much quicker, and then I can make sure that it's accurate that way as well, to what has been played, because it will be what has been played. So yeah, there'll be the recording, there will be the score, and then finally there will be sort of a musical justification, discussing why I chose to do certain things in terms of the progressive rock side of the compositions, and why I chose to do things concerning the classical structure of the pieces, according to the form that I'm working in any given piece. So that is the three different parts of this project, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it now. I think doing all the research and sort of finding my way and learning everything to get to this point has been really useful, but I'm ready to get stuck into it now and get writing and start putting these pieces together. So I'm looking forward to it. It will be good. So that's my module 4 roundup, and my sort of the setting everything up for the final project.